Welcome back to Digging Deeper. Today on the call we have Aaron Mowry and Kyle Jernigan. I don't know their titles. Put them up there, Audrey. Today we're going to go looking for all those drivers that you lost in your call system. We found them and we're here to show them to you. And we're back. So I think, one thing that I want to talk about here is, I'm not only VP of marketing.
Bleep that out.
And then insert like a woo. I also am director
is that a wolf howling?
Of business development. And so, I manage people who have to make a lot of phone calls. And it's somewhat easy to pull reporting on the basics of like how many calls were made and then what was the result a little bit, like this many were answered, this many were connected. But when you start, there's a little bit of frustration there always of going, all right, we closed this many deals from it, hired drivers, closed this many deals from it, but how do I start to find the calls I need to look at to actually make a difference to move the needle, right? Like if I want to make some sort of incremental change in this big massive data that I'm looking at, where do I start? And I think that's pretty applicable to manage a team of recruiters. They're on the phone constantly, they're talking a lot, and you probably have these big massive pools of data to say we made this many calls, we hired this many drivers, but it can be a little daunting to go, okay, where do I start? If I want to actually make a difference here, start making changes that are going to result in more hires, how do I start making changes along the way? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We have the tools and the data to say, this is where you should start to start getting more hires from the phone calls that you're having. And why is that important? Because if you look at all the data that we have, and maybe we can flash some sort of stat that shows when drivers are ready to move jobs, most often they're picking up the phone and they're making a phone call of some sort, whether that's through your advertising or a click to call or looking at the phone number on a truck or on a billboard, whatever it is, they're usually end up on the phone in some capacity. And your ability to garner value out of those phone calls and find ways to improve is very important and relevant to how many drivers you're hiring. I say all that to say what we're digging into today is how do you get more value out of those phone calls? How do you hire more drivers from the phone calls you're currently getting? And we're not even going to talk about how to get more phone calls, how to get more leads in the door. We're just going to say, if you were to take this current volume of phone calls that you're getting, where do you start to get more value? The first layer of it is just answered calls versus unanswered calls. If for a typical fleet, what's the average ratio or what percentage of their calls go unanswered?
Can I say we're about to get into this?
Yes.
Would y'all agree with this statement? Because I struggle with some of these numbers.
Yep.
And when we do this a lot, and I think some of it's maybe slight arrogance on our end because we have so many campaigns and so many clients that, hey, this is the benchmark.
Yep.
Well, the average divorce rate is somewhere around 50%. The number's not good, but it is the average.
It's interesting you bring up that because I wanted to talk about, not divorce, but I wanted to talk about the idea that just because it's industry average, I think we can say, yes, this is average, but this is bad. This is a place where the industry needs to change.
When we dig into best performing clients and maybe underperforming clients and what separates them. There's a lot. I mean, there's some nuance to it, but the process is such a big deal.
Yeah.
And I feel like advertising gets blamed a lot of times.
Right.
That it didn't work well. I had a client recently say, and we're hearing this a lot, hey, there are budget cuts. Like we have to dial back spend. So I need more applications, but I can't spend more. They're basically telling the sales rep, don't even offer a budget increase as an answer. I can't. So this is definitely one of the first things. You have 500 phone calls that went unanswered.
Yep. So let's look. We got this pulled up. So the industry average, and maybe this isn't 100% accurate, but this is probably very close and directionally accurate and based off of the data of our clients, essentially, correct?
These industry averages, that's pulling, sort of rolling up the answered versus unanswered of all the calls for all the campaigns we're running right now.
So we see this, that on average, 39% of calls go completely unanswered.
Yeah, and if you, to kind of reframe that means about 20% of your budget is an unanswered phone call. So if you need more hires or more full applications, there's a good chance you already have the phone call inventory.
Good way to put it. Yep.
Well, thank you. You probably have the phone call inventory to get the increase that you need without needing more leads.
When we dig into a new potential client and kind of see what have you done before, let's talk through what you're unhappy about and the nuance of their current campaign strategy. A lot of them, when we ask, hey, what does your campaign look like as far as day parting? What are you turning off the phone number after 5 p.m.? Are you seeing a high number of phone calls in the evenings on the weekends? We do an excellent job. If you look at any of our bell curves, it drops drastically at the end of the day. Well, I mean, your campaigns, the phone numbers show or disappear off the ads and off the landing page after hours. So I would say that when we look at 39% unanswered, a lot of folks will say, well, that's because you're getting calls on nights and weekends. That's skewing that. And it's not, at least not in our data. It is pretty common with other vendors.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Not all missed calls are created equal is a phrase that I like to say. Some advertising channels, you can control when the traffic comes in, like by time of day. If it's a lot of job postings, you can't, because that job posting on Indeed or Craigslist, it's going to run 24 hours a day all weekend. And if that driver is looking at 2 a.m. at your job posting and they say, hey, I'm going to try to make a call, well, that's a little bit different. So to your point, Aaron, we don't necessarily say, hey, 40% is the average. Let's go look at your, production during business hours and after business hours. What can we do within the hours that you control?
Right.
Then we say, as a good partner, what are the things that we can do from our side of the fence to try to improve and cut down on those misses?
Let's see what we're looking at here. It shows, and to your point, the majority of their unanswered calls, like the highest unanswered rate is at 2 p.m., I believe. Is that correct?
Looks like 10. Or
10 and 2. We typically see it's generally a little before lunch and a little after lunch when answered percentages are a little bit higher compared to other hours of the day.
Well, anyway, my whole point was, even at 40%, this is 8 to 5, 40%.
Yeah. So if we're looking at just boosting our ability to answer the phone, to drive that percentage down, to beat the industry average, because we shouldn't even be comparing ourselves to that because the industry average is not good, where do we start?
You have always said, I would like to go on record, that Aaron Mowry has always said, look at your technology before you look at your people.
Yep.
So what within my call system, my phone call system, do I control that could make an impact immediately? And I agree with him. Look at dial the number the driver calls. What do they have to do before they get connected and start that conversation? I think it's your phone system and your IVR.
Okay. Now, let me clarify here. If they end up in the IVR, that would still show as an answered call in this, right?
No. So
this would not?
Correct. And it is until after that transfer happens.
Okay.
So for all of the way we set up all of our phone calls is if we do have an IVR in place, and the driver presses 1 to speak with recruiting, and then it starts ringing, and then either gets to a human answers or voicemail, that's an answered call.
Right.
Other systems that we talk to our clients where we just connect it to their IVR.
Yeah.
We drop it off, and I've got to press 7 to speak with recruiting. I don't know what necessarily happened after that.
Right.
But that's where we see the easiest way to increase answered calls starts with just a quick audit of your inbound call experience.
Yep.
What can I improve? What can I improve? What can I speed up?
Okay.
And get the recruiting option first in that IVR tree, please.
Make sure in your IVR that the recruiting option is high in the list. Don't bury it down the list.
If you're going to have one, or have that number route right into your phone system and ring everybody at once.
Okay.
To your point, I've seen it where it rings everyone. And then the downside to that is you have one recruiter, but this happens more often at smaller fleets, but a recruiter saw that they missed the call and will text them even though it rang to the other recruiter and they answered. If that makes sense. It can be a little confusing to the driver, but anyway, to me, that is still more advantageous than, it's
ending up in voicemail.
Yeah, that's right. It's ending up in voicemail, or it's a 2-minute IVR before anyone answers and they just hang up.
Which brings another thing. Audit your voicemails.
Yeah.
Everybody. It should not say, extension 235 is not available. Like it should be a greeting from the person, and then that person should get an email that they have a voicemail to call that driver back as soon as possible.
And we've found multiple instances where the voicemail is not set up. Especially, you've got so many recruiters that are remote nowadays.
Yeah.
So it'll forward to a
cell phone. 3 quick tips to help us answer more phone calls is audit the IVR, audit all your voicemails, and then maybe look at changing up your process from a round robin to something that puts more urgency on answering the call.
I agree.
All right,
that's good.
Let's move on. So we talked about one thing. I think people have more sense, maybe I'm wrong, they probably have more a sense of the answered versus unanswered and that's more of an obvious loss of value there. But let's start digging into, so we take all the unanswered calls, we put them in one section. Let's talk about the actual answered calls. What are all the statuses that we want to look at? If we're looking at like answered calls and where we're losing value on calls that we're answering, I think one of the first places I would want to look is how many people did we talk to that were unqualified or ineligible?
So 11% of calls being generated are from someone that is ineligible to work for that company. Could be experience, could be criminal record, could be type of experience for one reason or another. That conversation is getting flagged as ineligible.
Yeah, and I think one thing you mentioned earlier is most of the people on this webinar will have paid to generate that phone call in some capacity. So if you're looking for cost savings, that you don't want to be paying to generate a phone call from someone that has no chance of working for you.
Right.
So what are some things we can put in place to mitigate that?
I think the big one is make sure those requirements are near the phone number. So, or at least emphasize on the page some more. So what are the knockout things that you've got to have? Just make sure it's there. And not everybody's going to read it. We get that. And there's a million ways that we've tried to overemphasize that. And whether it's a filter or press 1 to speak with the recruiting, press 1 again if you're an experienced driver. That creates some more friction. Not necessarily what I would recommend.
Yep.
But just emphasizing those requirements. You'd be shocked how many times clients send us what they want on a landing page or in a job posting.
Yeah.
And those key knockout kind of identifiers aren't included.
Right. What would you include on that?
I would say this is one of those that you need to hold your partnerships, your vendors accountable. This is one that we definitely play a major part in, and that percentage, we look at it, the client should as well, and that is a part that there should be some accountability on the vendor on how many are ineligible.
Do you think 11% is high? Like if you're looking at it and it's 11%, is that a cause for concern, or do you think that's okay? That's not terrible.
Well, I don't think it's terrible because we're talking about 11% of 49% of all leads. It's about 50-50 between calls and forms.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a small percentage of a big volume.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I don't necessarily think it's, fire alarm or cause for extreme worry. But to Aaron's point, you should be looking at your ineligible call percent by vendor. So who's producing a bunch versus who's producing a little.
The problem is, again, I'm being a little bit boastful. It's easy to do that in your form submissions, and they do hold us accountable and their vendors accountable on form submissions that are, not hireable, ineligible.
Right.
I haven't talked to many, or I can't think of any off the top of my head, that have access to that ineligible by call.
Right.
So this is maybe, I know the downside is we're raising our hand, telling them when we stink at something.
Yep. We're good like that. All right. If we look at other statuses and dispositions within the answered call group, what would be another area that you would want to look at?
I'm a huge fan of digging into not interested.
Okay.
Like this tells me as an employer why drivers are saying no to my job.
Okay.
And so then I'm going to do some like coaching and brainstorming, like, hey guys, pay is the number one thing. We can't change it. How do we reframe that? Or it's route, or it's equipment. How can I step through that?
Now, this tool that we have here, Randall Reilly's tool, it groups the not interested into different categories, right?
That's right. And so this kind of makes that, so now you don't have to listen to 300 phone calls to find out why drivers are saying no. And I could even break it down and say, Aaron's really good at overcoming the route objection. Hey, let's listen to that recording, everybody. Let's start saying what Aaron is saying so we can get better.
What else would you look for in here?
So we had a client recently that when they would extend an offer, they wouldn't really get too in depth with the driver until they got the full application. Once they got the full application, they would set up a call and talk through the job and extend an offer. She mentioned that pay really wasn't discussed, weekly miles and cents per mile, average weekly pay, whatever. All the bonuses didn't really get discussed until after that full application and that phone interview.
Yeah.
And then her comment was, a large percentage of those I just don't hear from afterwards. I can't get them back on the phone. And she was inferring, I think our pay isn't competitive. Mm-hmm. But I don't know for sure. I just know that once I start talking about pay, I don't hear from them anymore. And this to me is a good example of, if you ask the right questions and you are using call disposition and in the recording and the AI can capture that, they would be able to take that back to the C-suite. But all she was doing was inferring. That, I don't hear from them anymore.
Is there anything else within the answered category that you would want to look at? If you were looking to the context of all this is, hey, we're not trying to increase lead volume here. We're just looking to get wins from our current call volume. And we want to look at the ones that we're answering. Where are we losing value?
Yeah, I think you can use reports and tools like this to buy back some recruiter time.
Yeah.
Because if I'm looking at this dashboard here, I'm getting a good number of ineligible calls. So that conversation happened.
Yep.
And the driver didn't have enough experience.
Yep.
So as the client, you should be holding your vendors accountable to that. And that's where we step in. Like, what's the source of the ineligible calls? How can we overemphasize what's causing that ineligibility, if you will, to try to provide a higher quality. So then when that conversation happens, that 1.5 or 2.5 minutes isn't wasted for the recruiter. Because when you multiply that times 371 times this happened, it's a bunch of time.
Yep.
I just need to get more efficient with my inventory of calls that I'm getting right now.
I see one down there. I'm just curious. I want to get the transferred. What's happening there with transferred, and is there anything there?
All right, you stole my thunder. That's where I was going.
Okay.
This is probably the worst. I know we're blurring out the client specifically here. This is probably the worst client to talk about the transfer issue because this graph shows it's not a big deal with them.
Yeah, right. They don't do it.
If you'll give me a few minutes to go through this on why to me, this is bigger. It's the biggest one, bigger than the ineligible, bigger than the ones we've already talked about. This is my hill to die on.
This is his pet peeve.
You have a soapbox.
But I am going to praise this client.
Preach it, brother.
This client specifically, it doesn't look like an issue. It's not. And here's why. One reason is they have a team bonus and their recruiters are paid commission. Mm-hmm. So I wish we could dig into all the other ones that we can pull out, especially our major fleets, the big fleets. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable how big a problem it is. But a driver calls in following up on the form they filled out, which is, depending on your ATS system, that form has been routed to a recruiter. So it's in some recruiter's work list.
Yep.
The driver calls in, either I have filled out the full application, I wanted to check on it, or, hey, I'm following up. How does my PSP or my MVR look or work history?
Yep.
Because they have a routing system and a phone tree, some other recruiter answers the call and they see quickly, hey, you're assigned to Josh. But this client here says, hey, Josh is on the phone or he stepped out at lunch. What questions can I answer for you? Let me make sure I take care of you. Because they're paid commission and they also have a team bonus.
Right.
That doesn't happen most of the time. And I would say the majority, if you're looking at how are we missing hires,
yep.
Here you go.
It is an example where the driver calls in, because that's the hardest part is getting the driver back on the phone. asking questions. Like that is a buying signal if you are a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, hey, Josh is on the phone. I'll leave a note for him to call you back. We also know that driver has filled out 3 or 4 applications and is probably doing that with each one of them.
Right.
Hey, where are we on this? So to me, this is the biggest bucket
to fix
in your process. Pay a team bonus, pay some type of a commission, or even an assist commission.
Right.
Recruiter who it's assigned to gets $200. The one who fields it or moves it down the ball down the court gets $50.
Well, so we listened to when we were kind of prepping for this and finding a lot of lost value.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people that would call and they go, "Oh, they're not here right now." I'll leave a note for them to call you back. They weren't categorized under transferred. They were hidden in the schedule.
No, that's a good point, because you're right. It happens both ways. Hey, they're not here. I'll leave them a note. So that shows up as callback.
Yep.
The other one is, hey, you're assigned to Josh. Let me transfer you.
And Josh is on the phone.
Josh doesn't answer.
Josh is on the phone or whatever.
So
I'm sorry, but that shows up in the system as an answered call, even though by the time it gets to Josh, it's unanswered.
Yeah. So if we're looking at like the two, so we've got kind of the obvious of like, you're just going to look at the data and you're going to say, okay, we got an issue here. So you got like, we're not answering enough phone calls. Let's do some process things. Too many ineligible things. I'm going to talk to my vendor. You were getting too many people lost in the IVR. All these things, just like, we're going to take a process look. But when we start looking at like the amount of people being transferred and the scheduled for callback, I think this is an area where we would say, now you got to dig in. You got to dig in and listen and see what's going on. So if we can, let's dig in. Maybe we choose a different clients to look at, but I'd like to dig into some of those transferred and scheduled for callback to see, so we can kind of show, hey, you lost this driver. You're not getting them.
I'm saying here's 145 times where the driver's done all the work for your team and you just swept it aside.
Your call will be recorded for quality assurance and training purposes.
Thank you for calling. How can I help you?
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay.
Yes, sir. How can I help you?
Calling in today because I did fill out an application with you guys.
Oh, okay. Okay. Bear with me 1 second. I'll see who you are assigned to, and I'll get you over to them.
Say one more
Hold
time.
on 1 second. All right, transferring you over right now. Hold on for me 1 second.
Yes, ma'am.
Into the abyss.
Well, do we know?
It said voicemail, left no voicemail.
So that means it just transferred into.
So this is what the driver is experiencing. That silence where I would have hung up, I thought I would have been transferred into nothing. Why couldn't that recruiter have?
No one is available to answer your call at this time. Please leave a message after the tone.
Oh, wow.
Recording. You may hang up or press
Hold
1
on.
for more options.
And he hangs up.
He gone.
Go back to the screen and see where it says, which one was it? The first one?
Yeah.
So it says transferred, reached voicemail, no voicemail.
Be recorded for quality
See if
assurance
this one's any
and
better.
training purposes.
Thank you for calling. How can I help you?
Yes, I was calling. I had received a call from this number. I'm assuming it's concerning company driving, truck driving position.
Yes, it does. Hold on 1 second. Hold on. I'll get you over to. Looks like maybe.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know who called you, but hold on 1 second.
I don't know who called me, but I have.
Okay, looks like was assigned to you. Hold on 1 second.
No one is available to answer your call at this time. Please leave a message after the tone. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Hello. You left a phone message or at least your phone number on my phone, so I was returning a call about truck driving position. Give me a call when you get a chance. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye.
I want to give a disclaimer here.
Okay.
Number one, process-wise, they got to have their names in their voicemail. Company name, personal name. There's no name in the voicemail.
Yep.
But I would say in the very nice, sweet recruiter who's answering the phone, it's not her fault. She's doing what they've told them to do.
That's right. That's right.
She is playing the role of somewhat of a receptionist. Let me just pass you off.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a poor, again, it's not her fault. It's just a poor execution of process.
To use a word from our last one, this is ubiquitous with many fleets.
Yes.
And what is the fix here? And I would say the context is where, if we're looking for areas to find more hires from the current call volume, this is a gold mine right here. This whole transferred bucket, I scheduled a call back, go and listen to the recordings and you can see, oh, we're never hearing from that driver again.
Well, the percentage, it's going to be somewhere pretty high too, 40%, 50%.
Yeah. So how do we fix this?
I think the first thing is you got to do some measuring. I got some steps that I wrote down here is you've got to measure like what percentage or how many am I getting where this sort of internal negative experience for the driver, how many times is my team producing that? Then, what are some possible updates and what's the cost involved? It doesn't cost you a thing to stop transferring like that.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a new phone system update. There could be some costs in there. So you just kind of get your numbers together.
Right.
Then you got to implement it. Okay, we're going to not transfer people if we've got X in our ATS.
Right.
I'm going to go ahead and work that lead and you're going to work it when it happens to you and we're going to see what happens at the end of the month. And then do a little bit of measuring, a month, 6 weeks, 2 months from now. Okay, are we better?
Mm-hmm.
And chances are, if you're better internally with that process, you're going to have more hires from the stable of leads or the herd of leads that you've been getting.
Okay, what would you add to that?
I would say
it's not nice to point, David.
They may need help on redefining the process. What does a team bonus look like?
Yeah.
What does that pay out? And that's where we could come in and help on the consulting side of things.
This is what Maldonado does.
Every day.
Yep.
So I feel like that could be overwhelming to some recruiting directors. Like, I don't even know where to start with that.
Right.
Yeah.
We could help there.
So we talk about, we got answered versus unanswered, and we gave some very helpful tips of like, if we wanted to, the industry average is not good on just how many people call and then never actually talk to somebody. And we need to look at our IVRs. We need to look at our process. We need to look at what kind of voicemails we have set up, audit all that. Then we talk about the people that actually connected. We have things like, hey, they called, but they were ineligible to work for us. You need to hold your vendors accountable. Look at how you're putting the actual knockout questions next to phone numbers, things like that. Then we have things like not interested. The good thing about our call reporting inside of Stratus is it categorizes the not interested. So you can actually take data to your C-suite and say, look, every time we start talking about our home time or every time we start talking about our pay, this is where we're losing drivers. And we need to be more competitive on this front. Then we talk about there's this whole gold mine you need to dig into and you need to go and listen to of the like there's two places to look. There's the calls that get transferred and you can look and say transferred, left voicemail or transferred, didn't leave a voicemail, that sort of thing. You're probably losing those drivers, but often they're hiding in the scheduled callback. So they're an eligible driver. We talked to them.
Were they an edible driver?
They were an edible driver. This is for cannibal trucking. They were an eligible driver, and we scheduled a callback, but same thing. It was really just a transfer. Hey, so-and-so's at lunch, but they're going to call you back. And you're probably not going to get that driver back on the phone.
I have another one.
Go ahead.
Oh, here we go.
The other one is Sent App.
Yeah.
Which isn't showing up here much.
There it is right there.
Okay, Sent App. I would argue on this one too. Let me back up. The 2 or 3 examples we just listened to on phone calls.
Right.
You could tell the recruiter looked in the ATS system and there was some profile because she knew who the driver was assigned to.
Correct.
There is a large percentage that have not filled out a form. And we find in here where if you do an audit, hey, what is that number, 425?
Yep.
425 calls where there was a discussion and the recruiter says, hey, I'm going to send you an email or a text with an app. When we do an audit, over half of those conversations don't even show up in 10th Street as they didn't start the profile. You may not take the full application, but they did nothing. So there is no paper trail, if you will. that driver had ever called and talked to anyone. And only if they did click the link and fill the app out do you now capture that information. Mm-hmm. So this is another example of, at least if you send the app, send the link or whatever it is in an email or a text, get their name, their phone number, their email, capture that in the driver profile. That way it's in the system. And if you don't get a full application link, now I can do some drip marketing or automation back to. But that's another big one that people are just, it's about 50% that you send a link to and they never fill it out.
So one thing that this call reporting also allows you to do is it speeds up the time to be able to say what individual recruiters on my team need extra focus and where. So if we look at that, what are the things that we should kind of be looking at? What are the red flags that say, hey, we need to pull this person aside and maybe give them a little extra coaching, a little extra help?
I think we have some area for improvement.
Right.
So it may be different for each recruiter, but you take once you get 3 or 4 months worth of data, I think it's better to use the client specific data than it is industry. And what I mean by that is, hey, if 20% of the industry of all the calls, benchmark, say we're not interested due to route or we're not interested due to pay, that's not a great metric because each client is different. They may have great routes. So they're never going to be close to that benchmark, but their pay may be low.
Right.
Anyway, if you get the client's data and you say, hey, it looks like 20% of our drivers end up not being interested due to pay. But if I can see outliers, hey, this recruiter looks like 45 or 50% are falling into the not interested due to pay tag or bucket or status, that says something. Let's talk about that objection. Let's go listen to a few of those calls.
Right.
So anyway, there are going to be outliers in a bunch of buckets, route, pay, equipment, home time. And if there's anything that sticks out that maybe a recruiter's not handling that well, that's a room for coaching.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. So you're just, instead of saying like, well, the industry average is this, that's not as helpful as going, the average across our department is this, and you're out of line with that average, and so we're going to look at those specific calls. We're going to listen to those specific calls together to see what is causing you to have this outlier performance.
And no director of recruiting wants to go mine hundreds of calls to do that.
Right.
Nobody has time. Like, I'm probably looking at my total calls. How many calls did you get, and she get? And what was the talk time? And that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And and I'm busy. How can you lead me to the 15 things or the 15 conversations that I can listen to really quick? To figure out the best way to help the people that are on my team.
We've been talking here for about 30 minutes or so, but the amount of time we spent just going, all right, I'm going to check out these transferred calls. That took 5 minutes, and we could have already seen, like, if you were running that department, you could have seen within 5 minutes. Okay, I know some easy changes we need to make here. I say easy, but I know some changes we need to make, and it wasn't that hard to find.
That's right. That's the big problem, is finding what to do.
Yeah.
And this makes that easy, thankfully.
All right. Any last summary?
Not all missed calls are created equal. You need to, just because it's not answered, there's such great opportunity within unanswered phone calls to increase your number of hires without increasing your budget. And I just want everybody to know if we can just take a little bit of time and look at calls that were not answered, you can get more full applications and more hires. And I think a better experience for all of your hires overall as well.
What are your last words?
The incremental cost of layering in a technology like this, you'll reap the benefits in month one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Depending on the size of the fleet and the amount of leads coming in, 2, 3 to 10 hires increase a month, in my opinion, just based off of a few tweaks.
Well, I think that's pretty good for digging deeper. Let's end it there. We'll see you next time, and I hope you stick around for the Q&A.